I got assigned to Campo, California, which is the furthest east mountains in San Diego County. So it's outside of like what you think of San Diego City proper. And it's up in the high desert mountains where it snows in the wintertime and it gets above 110 in the summertime. And it was a station of about 50 agents, little trailers down on the border. And there were two other women assigned there. Both were married to agents there, but they were always away on detail. But I was the only woman there at the time in 1995. And back in the day, the station no longer exists, but back in the day, the Campo agents of the old patrol were known as the toughest of the toughest, because we hiked very dangerous terrain, often very deep into the mountains, and we hiked alone. And so I started there on the midnight shift with my other classmates, and we would be assigned to what they call journeyman. So it's like a field training officer. And we would ride with them for 2 weeks, and then we'd switch to another one. Excuse me. And they would evaluate us every 2 weeks. And they would evaluate you and say recommended for retention or not recommended for retention, and the reason why. And my very first evaluation was not recommended for retention. And I remember the exact words, quote, because her facial expressions give me the impression that she does not like me, not recommended for retention. She should be fired on her Spanish boards. And what it was is, it turns out one of my instructors at the academy, my driving instructor, Roberto Lopez, was a Campo agent, and I didn't know that. And he had called Campo Station before I got there. Today they still do this. I know a woman who I just talked to a couple weeks ago that they do this to, and she resigned after the academy. Said accuses men of fake sexual assaults in order to try and graduate, and she couldn't hack it, and this and that, and blah blah blah. And the person who accepted the phone call was the supervisor who I talk about in my book, and called Supervisor Donner. And he's the one that took the call. So that's how I knew it happened. And then he's the one that, when I got this evaluation, called me in, told me about it. And I said, yeah, well, I didn't know I had to be their cheerleader. And he said, well, maybe that's what it takes for you to pass your post-academy. Because at the time you have, like, I don't know, 6 months of post-academy, I think. And you have a midterm and you have a final, which they can fire you on your subjective Spanish boards. And basically, I had one other classmate who was the only black agent at the station. And they were going after him too, calling him the N-word and stuff, and giving him a hard time. And so he said, I'm going to put you two on a drug lay-in detail with these two senior agents who will give you a fair shot. And at this time, the guy who gave me that bad review, not recommended for retention, is sitting out back, smoking and drinking with my classmates who have just gotten off duty. And so I'm sitting inside with the supervisor talking about this, just shaking my head like, I can't believe this shit is following me here. And I want to say, do you know how tough I am? Like, look at my graduation picture. That fucker is behind me, and I'm not right behind me, but he's behind me. And I'm like, I went through that academy standing next to him. I think I'm pretty fucking tough enough. Now I tell him, I said, like, you know, I don't have a bulletproof vest. All my classmates got their vest within a week of being here. I don't have one. And he said, yeah, I know. They're trying to get you to leave. And I said, well, I ain't gonna leave. And so he was just like, well, do you want to do this detail or not? And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, if it's the only way I pass, I guess I have to do it. So we ended up doing that, my classmate and I, and it was December and January, February, we laid in the snow for like anywhere from 10 to 12, 13 hours, waiting for these drug smugglers to come up different trails. And we never once got any dope. It reminded me kind of like the physical fitness test, where it's just like, do as I say, kind of thing, if you want to survive. So That's what we both did, and we both ended up finally passing. But then it becomes Agent Bud only passed because she's fucking the supervisor, and he helped her pass, and I was never fucking that supervisor. And so then that becomes my reputation. And then they keep coming after me and trying to get me fired and telling trainees not to back me up in the field. And I'm getting assigned to very desolate areas, and they thought I would break down and cry. But no, I go out and hike, and I apprehend people and drugs. And so they kind of, I think most of the women break down from like the tricks they play, the dirty underwear in their mail drawer boxes, the porn hanging everywhere, the live snakes thrown in your truck. You know, all this stuff that they do, the filling up the only woman's toilet in the whole freaking station with shit so you can't use it. I mean, it's just stupid shit. And you just want to get in your truck and go out and hike and do your job and prove that you can do all this stuff. And that is where, when you're at your stations, that's when they start to pit you against each other. So they started with pitting me against the more senior women who occasionally would come to the station. They'd be like, man, Bud can hike, Bud can catch, Bud can stop vehicles. She is really, and then that starts the queen bee mentality in some of the other women, and that's unfortunate in the Border Patrol. So there are so few women in the Border Patrol. There's still stations in the Border Patrol that don't have many women, if women at all. And they tell you when you get there, it's a manned station. You better just shut up and put up. And that's what you have to do. So there's very little camaraderie in the Border Patrol. And even when you do reach rank in the Border Patrol, you only reach rank and get other rank if you're willing to keep quiet about the sexual assault, the rape culture of the Border Patrol. So you can talk to your female senior rank, which there were not female senior ranks, not very many, none at my station when I was there. And they might privately say to you, oh, it's always been this way, blah, 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 blah. But then when you go to report something, they sit there and they don't defend you, and they won't come up and back you. And I've seen agents before say, yeah, this has happened to you. I've had agents say, this has happened to you, this is unfair, but I'm not going to come forward and back you up on any of this. I don't want to get involved. And so because they know how bad it is. Yeah, because of retaliation. So, I mean, because they thought that I had filed a false sexual allegation in order to get through the academy, and because somebody spread the rumors that obviously the only way I made it through post-academy was sleeping with this supervisor who was like 350 pounds, which is ridiculous. And by the way, I'm overweight now. I'm not trying to criticize the man just because he's overweight, but it was just ridiculous back then to be 24 years old and saying I'm sleeping with this man. But at any rate, you know, it's constant talk about us, and the retaliation that I received. I was run over on duty in the parking lot by a trainee agent who was being told not to back me up. And then he jumps out after he hits me as I'm walking, hits me with a 4x4 Bronco and runs me over and fucks up my knee and my hand and all this other stuff and says, you better keep your mouth shut. That's what he says to me. Magic marker, taking down my white car and the tires flattened. You know, just threats, no backup in the field, being out in a desolate position, you know. Sometimes they'll end up giving you drug tests if they think that you're emotionally not handling your sexual assault. If you tell them I need to go, which I never did, but I know from other women who have, you know, I need to go to therapy. I need this because I've been sexually assaulted by this agent. Can you please move him to a different station, move me to a different station while the complaint is going on, and I need to go seek some therapy for this. They'll drug test you. Or they'll put you on the line and tell you, go to the firing range and qualify, and your rapist will be there. So, like, whenever management was... When I was pushing management or pissed off somebody in management, I would walk in on shift, and that motherfucker was there in the meeting you have before you go on shift, it's called muster. He would be sitting in there with one of my classmates. Like, I just decided to do overtime up in Campo, which is 60 miles away from Imperial Beach, and I happen to be working on your shift on the day that you're working. That's retaliation. And so I ended up, I would end up just having to leave and claim sick leave that day because I wasn't going to go out into the field with him. I wasn't going to go on the firing line with him. But that fear was always there. Like, I have to go qualify today. God, I hope he's not going to be there. Oh, I have to go do CPR renewal. Oh, I have to go do baton training. I hope that fucker isn't my instructor. I mean, I remember having it out with a special operations supervisor over the Explorer program. I was the lead on the Explorer program, which I hated, but I did it because they asked me to. Okay, all right. So the Explorer program in the Border Patrol is like the way we indoctrinate local kids into thinking that hunting people of color in the mountains of the Southwest isn't really as racist as it is. So we get these kids from high school and we make them into mini Border Patrol agents and tell them that the way we treat asylum seekers and migrants is all about national security and not about racism. And so we're indoctrinating them into the things that I was indoctrinated into in the academy, the racist rhetoric and all that, the xenophobia. And so I had just come out as being gay because I was tired of everybody saying that I was sleeping with this guy. I mean, we're talking like 4 or 5 years in the Border Patrol. And I think I had just been, this is probably 5 years, I think I had just been promoted to senior patrol agent, which is the highest rank you could get before going into management. And I had put a little tiny rainbow sticker on my car. And my supervisor of the Explorer program called me in, and he said, there's some guys talking that some of the girls in the Explorer program are pretty hot, and you've got that gay sticker on your car, and we don't want any problems. I said, what? And he says, well, we don't want parents to think that you're sexually assaulting them. And I said, is somebody saying I sexually assaulted somebody? And he goes, no, but I just, I want to head it off. So I want you to take that off your car. And I said, you don't have any right to tell me what I can and can't have on my car. And he says, well, if you want to be the lead of the Explorer program, you're going to have to take it off. And I said, are you telling me that male agents at this station have been commenting on how sexually attractive they find my 16-year-old Explorer girls, children, and I'm the one you're asking about sexual assault and harassment? And he said, well, they're just talking about it. Men do it all the time, and I'm just looking out for you. And I said, no, you're not. I said, I tell you what, I'm just not going to take it off. And we're done having this conversation, and I quit. I quit the Explorer program. He's like, you can't quit. And I'm like, it's volunteer. Yes, I can. So then he has his supervisor, which is the special operations supervisor. So he's the supervisor of the supervisors, number 3 guy in charge of the station. Bob Mitchell. I say his name because he's dead now. He killed himself. He calls me into his office. And he's like, I thought you were tougher than that, bud. I thought, why are you quitting? You just get up and quit when things are tough. I see how you are. And I like, get the fuck out of here. Do you know anything about me? And then he's like telling me I need to have respect for his rank and making me stand up and all that. So he's shutting me down and forcing rank on me. So I have to shut up and I have to, not treat him like a friend and talk to him like that. And then he all of a sudden goes, whatever happened to you and Supervisor Donner? Weren't you guys having... And I was just like, And so, this stuff starts coming out, 5 years later, and I'm sitting in the 3rd highest, rank of the station's office talking to him. So it follows you everywhere you go. And it's like, I did none of that stuff. But meanwhile, my rapist is down, in Imperial Beach. He ends up, I think he got to a supervisor. And he ended up retiring and has a great pension and has a great life. But meanwhile, I'm constantly having to answer for his actions. Putting a dead snake in somebody's car is considered normal. I know that sounds weird. But putting a live rattlesnake in your truck is not normal. Intentionally jerking off in your car that you're assigned and you know is going to go to Agent Jim Bud in the next shift, it's not normal. Taking all the vehicles and making sure, you don't get a vehicle. So then you have to walk out to the border and just hike on your own and do it. That's not normal. The porn everywhere, I mean, it was normal, but to have it put in my box or to have female underwear put in my box is not normal. I mean, I was being targeted. They didn't do this. They weren't doing this to the other two female agents because they're married to male agents. And those female agents were willing to toe the line and be quiet about all this stuff and let the guys do whatever they wanted. It's interesting. Border Patrol agents have this folklore about this thing called rape trees. And they tell everybody, outsiders, that the rape trees are from cartel or smugglers. Back in my day, we didn't have much cartel organizing the smuggling of migrants. It was mostly just narcotics. But since all of our policies have made smuggling migrants so lucrative, now they're involved. So nowadays, they'll say it's the cartel. North of the border, in some places, you will find trees that are covered in women's underwear, bras, panties, etc. And they say that the smugglers rape the females in the group. They say the smugglers rape the females in the group, and then they take their underwear and they hang it in the tree as a trophy sign. That's another one of those stories that I was like, get the fuck out of here. It just sounded ridiculous, right? I don't know. I just can't think of some of these things that these men think of. But what it actually is it is a threat to females everywhere, both migrants and female agents. So when I first got in as a trainee, everybody knew about me. Even the neighboring station, El Cajon, apparently knew about me, and they were targeting me as well, because sometimes we met up with the El Cajon agents and had to work the Tecate, California border area together because those zones butted up next to each other. So I was down in Tecate, and when I would walk into the processing center in Tecate, there would be female underwear hanging from the ident cameras, which are like on a little movable little wire thing. So they just kind of stand there, and then you can move them to the person's face, and then you click the computer and take their picture. So they were hanging this female underwear off of the cameras and stuff. Number one, what are they doing with all this female underwear on duty? Huh? And then second, it's like, and then I could hear them giggling in the offices and stuff. So rape trees in the Border Patrol are not actually from smugglers. And it was funny because I was with the Green Valley Samaritans in Tucson, Arizona, or Green Valley, Arizona, doing water drops for migrants out there in the desert. And Barb Lemon, who's a good friend of mine that was showing me what she likes to do to help migrants, showed me a rape tree. I said, what did the Border Patrol agents tell you about that? And I was kind of in shock because I hadn't heard that in decades, that term. And it kind of took me back. And she said, oh, the Border Patrol said that, the smugglers, the cartel, brings the women up here in groups and rapes them. And I'm like, who told you that? And she said, a Border Patrol agent. And I'm like, God, they have the same freaking stories that they had back in my day. And I said, think about it, Barb. We're 25, 30 miles north of the border, in the middle of nowhere. And you're telling me that cartel smugglers, whose whole livelihood depends on getting these people through, are suddenly going to stop 25, 30 miles north of the border, find the specific tree that they always use out of this entire desert to put panties on to create a rape. I said, these are being done by agents, Barb. There's no way that people are walking in foot, even smugglers. They're not using the same trail night after night after night after night for years to create a tree this robust with all this underwear on it. It's the men. And it was done to me. So it's a warning. So rape trees are a warning. A lot of it is just not answering you on the radio, or when you do call for help, they key their mics, and that's like silent laughter. So if you say something like you burn another agent over the radio or make fun of them over the radio, everybody keys their mics, and you hear click, 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 click on the radio. So that's kind of like everybody laughing. And so, you'll be calling for help and you hear a lot of clicks sometimes, and they're just laughing at you and stuff. Nowadays, a lot of the abuse and retaliation is even better hidden, though, because apparently there's the guys have a real fun game on their personal phones, because they're allowed for some reason to carry their personal phones on duty, and they use the Signal app, and they rate the women, and then they bet each other like on who has to buy beer at the end of the night, into shift, drinking beer after shift with the guys, where you drop your belts in your car and you take your badges off and you sit around and drink beer. It's called choir practice, because Border Patrol agents are known for bitching and moaning about every single thing. So they call it choir practice. And everybody sings and tells the stories of, and when I say sings, I mean they talk. They brag about how many migrants they've caught, who they beat up, all the games that they've played, and all this other stuff. Usually the person who ends up getting skunked that night, that means they don't get any apprehensions or any drug apprehensions or vehicle stops. That means they have to buy the beer. So, they sit around and they talk about all this stuff, and these things it's just like, it's the worst frat house you can imagine. That's what I describe it as. Some of them do. And I mean, there's female agents that abuse other female agents. There's that story of the senior female agent that Melissa Del Bosque was talking about in the Douglas Mafia story she did years ago. One of the female agents who was gay set her eyes on a female trainee, and the female trainee turned her down, and so she had other supervisors start writing her up for her uniform. That's another retaliation. You start getting written up for your uniform, which, like in Campo, is hard to do, because we were known for just like salt-stained hats and dirty boots, and anybody who had a freshly pressed, brilliantly green uniform was, and shine boots was frowned upon. So that was a little harder at Campo for them to do. But they get written up and they get written up, and they get, ridden pretty hard during their probationary period now. And it's all just to try and make you quit. That's all it is. I was stationed at Sector Intelligence, which was a prime position. There was only like 10 of us, maybe max, there at the time. I was trying to get out of the field because I was suffering from enforcing brutal and racist laws. I was suffering from the bodies I was encountering and all the brutality. And so I was trying to get out of the field, trying to go more to the investigative side, trying to, write reports and do things like that. And I had known for a long time that the man who was in charge of Campo Station was likely the one who was organizing the smuggling of narcotics in our patrol area. I had heard this through DEA intelligence that I had worked with in an East County law enforcement narcotics team that I worked on. I had heard it through other agents who had tried to go forward, and they call it drop the dime, And I think that comes from the fact that back in the day when we were young, a phone call and a payphone cost a dime. So I think that's why it's called that. Or rat. And the assistant chiefs would go into whoever they were meeting with, FBI. And I know one agent was meeting with the FBI trying to blow the whistle on this guy. And they broke into the meeting and pulled him out and said this is going to stop. I also had info from CHP, it's California Highway Patrol. And I kind of was at the point, I think I was so disgusted with what I had joined and what I honestly had become myself, and ignoring my own core values, starting to understand that I obviously had problems with racism and xenophobia that I was not proud of, that I had not been raised to have, and that I had made a mistake. And so I kind of almost was like gunning to find a reason to have to leave, to be honest with you. And so I started investigating him with the intent of turning over whatever I found to DEA or FBI. And he found out because I had kind of pushed it, and he called me into the station. And I was assigned at the time to San Diego sector headquarters on this detail. So every day when I go to work, I'm going to San Diego sector headquarters in Chula Vista and not up to Campo in the mountains. And I'm not in uniform. And it's a Monday through Friday. And but he calls me in and he pins me in a chair and tells everybody to leave the room. And he says, I know what you're doing. And you're right, I am doing it. And he admits everything. He tells me he's got sheriff's deputies involved up there that are helping as lookouts, which is what I had just learned. Because the sheriff's deputies showed up when I was sneaking around the area in plain clothes. And, you know, he's like, you're going to stop this shit, or I'm going to make sure, you know, we're going to put you in a closet and you're going to do nothing the rest of your career and this and that. And it scared the shit out of me, to be honest with you. I mean, yeah, I'm sitting there with my gun, but this is a patrol agent in charge. He's like a chief of a station. So I got my little beat-up ride that I was using as an undercover vehicle, some vehicle we had seized before on a drug load, and tooled it on back to sector headquarters. And, like, I don't even get my stuff on my desk before I can hear my boss, who is also a patrol agent in charge of intel at sector headquarters, calling me into his office. This guy's such a narcissist that he actually kept his desk up on a platform, so you'd have to look up to him. You know, he just says, I think you've made a mistake, and we'll protect you if you put in for this job. We'll create a job for you here at Sector, and you just keep your mouth shut, and you'll be promoted to supervisor. You'll get a raise before you know it. You'll be a chief, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, I'm not that type of woman. Mm-mm. And so he told me to think about it. And by the time I get home, Campo Station is calling me and telling me I have to do a midnight shift. And this was during a time when we didn't have very many apprehensions. And so I had to go out there in uniform and work a midnight shift. And basically, the guy I was investigating had them put me on a scope, right like 20, 30 yards off the border, which was dangerous. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, automatic weapon fire comes through the fence. And I couldn't see because we had the old style, complete steel walls back then, and I couldn't see except where the gunfire was coming off. And I had always sworn I would never shoot into Mexico. I knew the kids that lived down there. I knew the kids there before the wall went up. And my best option was to get out of there because I was outgunned. And I was sitting in a vehicle. So I did a 3-turn, got out of there. And this asshole that I'm investigating shows up at 3 a.m. in the morning and says, you know, the whole time I'm calling for backup and nobody's answering. Nobody at sector is answering, nobody at station, nobody in my zone who I've been talking to all night. And he says, I heard you asking for help and nobody responded, but have you learned your lesson yet? And I remember I didn't say anything. I just stared at him and I just put my truck in gear and I took off and I went home and I just made my decision. I just can't do that. They're going to kill me. And I can't cross that line. So when it came down to actually being told to cover something up, I couldn't do it. And so I resigned. Yeah, he went on making lots of money smuggling drugs. And he went on to retire. I mean, honestly, now that I'm over 50 now, and I just decided, like, there are no benefits to keeping silent, because what it does is, I mean, for me at least, it led to a massive suicide attempt. So staying silent just it's going to come out one way or another. And maybe that for a while in me that came out in probably like accepting the brutality that of the laws that I was enforcing, you know, in my own survival, and trying to survive myself and ignoring what I was doing to other people, and then eventually coming to terms with that and realizing I was going against my own core values, and a suicide attempt. The Border Patrol, so the whole point of the multiple avenues of complaints, multiple avenues of investigation, the entire system being controlled by Border Patrol. What you don't realize is that that's what they want. They want you to keep quiet about it. They don't want us to talk about it. And I mean, even Rodney Scott, you know, when he made that rape threat allegation against me on Twitter and told me to sit back and relax and just enjoy it. And Rodney Scott's former chief of the Border Patrol under the Trump administration. And he did that on purpose because he knows who I am. I mean, he, you know, he even just, he was like, why can't you understand that, you know, your sexual assault was an anomaly? It's not what most Border Patrol agents are doing. And it's not what most Border Patrol agents are doing, but enough are doing it that they have literally figured out how to control the systems that are supposed to be there to provide you with, you know, an avenue towards justice when you're sexually harassed or frankly sexually assaulted in the United States Border Patrol. So I think honestly, it doesn't matter what you do as a victim, and I would imagine that there are some male victims as well, but who are too afraid to come forward. But it, you know, to anybody who's out there wearing that green uniform, or even it happens in other police departments. Honestly, too, my experience is just with the Border Patrol is like, that's what they want. They want you to keep silent. They don't know what to do when you don't play the game. And so I suggest that people don't play the game, but obviously it's a personal decision for everybody to make. So, I mean, you have to understand that speaking publicly is you're not just pointing out this one Border Patrol agent, or you're not just pointing out this system in the Border Patrol. You're pointing out a sexual assault or corruption or any kind of incidents like this is obviously going to lead to the questions, well, if they're treating the female agents like this, what are they doing to the migrants? What are they doing to the children? And one only has to look at the amount of agents arrested in the Tucson sector to figure out there's a serious problem. And, you know, like, so the Border Patrol's whole point, and that I'm the loudest one, I'm the one that's called attention to this, is to then paint me as somebody who's crazy because I've had, obviously, a suicide attempt. So, yeah, I accept that. That's fine. Somebody who thinks that, you know, because she was sexually assaulted by this one bad agent in the Border Patrol, that the entire Border Patrol is like that, and it's not like that. But the truth of the matter is there are a lot of agents right now who are awaiting trial for sexual assault. There are agents who are under investigation for sexual assault. And even when we do find Border Patrol agents finally getting arrested for child sexual assault, child pornography, serial rape, we find out, you know, years later, decades later, and there are multiple victims, and then the Border Patrol refuses to open up the EEO files or OPR files or union files and say, okay, this agent actually was reported by female agents this and this time. This agent was reported by migrants this many times for sexual assaults, because those records exist. These agents don't just up and suddenly decide to start sexually assaulting and sexually harassing. The system allows that to happen. The system encourages it to happen. And when it does happen, it's covered up. Ideally, what's supposed to happen is the victim should be treated as the victim of a crime, and she should have access to advocates. She should have access to uh, psychological care. She should have all these things. The Border Patrol, being that this happened to her, I mean, if an agent was shot in the line of duty, they would take care of that agent. If an agent had a traffic accident or someone intentionally ran them over, they would take care of that agent. But what happens when you're the victim of a sexual assault or rape in the Border Patrol is just what you're talking about, where the victims typically know that this is going to go nowhere. They've already been warned by the females ahead of them. They've been told that this was what was going to happen. And I would imagine probably that there are all these little signals and cues, like when my instructor looked at my face and didn't say anything, that tells you what side he's on, and so what should happen is they should give her access to all of this. The Border Patrol needs to have actual rape crisis counselors. They need to have an independent group of people who are experts in sexual assaults and sexual harassment that then order the Border Patrol what to do. And the Border Patrol needs to be taken account of it, out of it and held accountable for it. But they never are. Another aspect of these investigations is that they postpone the hearings. They take forever to do the investigations. Like I said, sometimes 6 years or more. And honestly, by the time of it, the victims are like, I just want to move on with my life. I need to move on with my life so I can heal. And what happens when you're the victim of something like this is you cannot possibly start to heal unless you have safety and structure around you, unless you know that there are people that are going to investigate it and do a good job and take care of the situation. And you realize really quick that that's not going to happen in the Border Patrol. That's not going to happen whether the case is being handled locally, whether it's being handled through OPR or EEO or the union. And you just realize, you're just like, I just got to get on with my life, whether you have children or whether you have this or that. And so that's why I think the vast majority of victims of whether you're an agent who's a victim of another agent or whether you're a migrant, you just end up being like, I should have known better, or blaming yourself, and you end up trying to throw it over that mental wall, that trauma over that mental wall, and move on. And the Border Patrol knows this. That was bizarre. It was interesting. So I don't know Kevin through the Border Patrol. He contacted me on, is it Facebook Messenger? One day, I had just heard about my best friend from high school and college had a long bout with alcoholism, and so she kind of a long suicide, and she finally had died and he had contacted me within just finding that out. And Kevin wrote me, and he says, Jenn, I've hated myself for so long and I never understood why. And then I realized when reading you is like, I started becoming racist and enforcing these policies, and I felt bad about myself. And I was the one guy that was the team leader. I passed all the, physical fitness. I was the guy that the instructors like to hang out with and have beers with, and we would party together in the academy. And I'm like, uh-huh. And so he's like, but I want to follow you. I think you're amazing. I think you're beautiful. I love you, man. And I'm like, you're so full of shit. I have never heard a Border Patrol agent talk that way to a female Border Patrol agent unless he wants something. And so, and I was just kind of like, dude, I can't deal with this right now. And he just all of a sudden started admitting to me that he was a participant in a Game of Smiles event where a female agent was forced. Well, he says she volunteered it, but you know how men are. So She apparently volunteered in a drunken state, is I believe what he had said, and he didn't. He told me he didn't partake of anything, but she did get under the table voluntarily, is what he said to me, and but he didn't know that afterwards, when she had passed out, that they gang raped her. And oh my God, I'm so sad I didn't know that about her. And he's saying her name and stuff, and I didn't even know her name. And honestly, I would have to look back at the text to even know what he called her, because I don't need to know her name. At any rate, and so it just felt very invasive. It felt like he was trying to get close to me, and I didn't trust it. And so I just kind of, I never talked to him again, because it just did not feel safe and did not feel real to me. And then partly that he was at this party. He claims he wasn't involved. That he told me he was not involved in any of it. But I'm not so sure about that. I don't know. I haven't talked to him in the future, but that's how that happened. And then also no, I'm not going to talk to somebody who says he was there for a game of smiles. I just can't do that to myself. There are certain places I don't go. So my role right now, when I do have agents who call me and ask me for help because they are in a similar situation, which I do have a lot of agents that do talk to me, it's more about advice, certainly what they should expect if they're a junior agent, and they most often are. And then it's more about, honestly, support. So I try and get them the resources that they need, that the Border Patrol and the federal government is not providing them with. They are most often asked to make legal decisions about their cases, which they have in their trauma situation should not be making, but definitely they don't have the legal education to be making those decisions. But the Border Patrol, so while their assaulters have a union representative and oftentimes advice from maybe union attorneys available to them at times, you as the victim don't have any of this. So my role is very limited. If they decide they would like to go to the press, then obviously I can contact some press and help them do that. But I tell them all the pros and cons of coming forward and not coming forward. So that's, if they choose to come forward, that's their own deal. This is the first time I've ever had a male agent come forward and say, I was there during a sexual, during a sexual assault crime, and talk about it so openly. And I kind of feel it was interesting looking back on it. I kind of feel like he really doesn't get it. And I think most young men might not really get it. And certainly they don't get it when they're in an agency that's giving you all this propaganda about how women don't deserve to be in the Border Patrol and they can't hack it and all that, and they'll file false sexual assault allegations against you. And so they're being fed this misogynistic, sexist propaganda, and they don't understand why. And then they're trying to fit in at the same time, just like we're all trying to fit in and be good agents. And it was a weird experience, but I just, I can't go there with him, so I just let it drop. So when these things are reported in the press, and because our press is being really not just demoralized, but literally there's just no money for investigative reporting. When these incidents do make it to the press, they often feel few and far between. So even though at this moment there are at least 3 senior ranking Border Patrol agents on trial in Tucson for rape, well, one was just convicted. So now there's only 2. But it feels few and far between. even for people who live in Tucson. And it's because people are so busy and they get a variety of news from many different sources. But even the reporters, when they're writing these stories, they're not putting together the history. Like Tucson, if you study it for whatever reason, and I'm not sure if it's intentional, Tucson sector is what I call the rapey sector. There's so many pedophile agents in Tucson arrested and convicted. So many rapes going on, some of female agents, some of migrants, some of just Tucson citizens or local citizens in other areas and other counties. And the Border Patrol every time says, we don't tolerate that kind of shit in the Border Patrol. We're all about honor first and we'll investigate it and root it out. But what you don't realize is a lot of times the press does not repeat that this agent and this agent is also on trial for rape, and there's this culture going on and there's this going on because the Border Patrol is so quiet about it and they're just always honor first, honor first, honor first. And he wants to be the first female to come out and say this stuff. Nobody does. But for me, it just kind of like, and because of my suicide attempt, I felt like I had no choice but to tell the truth. I had kept so many secrets my whole life that this was one of them. And so I started digging into the culture and actually started seeing how many agents this affected. And it's just everywhere. And when we get together and do talk, I mean, the stories that come out from the agents and the female agents is just, it's amazing. But basically, nobody really pays much attention to the Border Patrol, and they have not in the past, because we police the migrants. And so they feel that these crimes are only being committed about migrants, and nobody really gives a crap because in this country, we think we associate migrants with criminals. We have criminalized all of them. And the attitude in the United States in most people, because they don't understand why migrants come and what's going on the border, is, well, you shouldn't have crossed. And like somehow, like you deserve to get raped somehow if you cross. And so there's that aspect of it. Most of the victims of Border Patrol agents who are committing sexual crimes, and again, I'm not saying all Border Patrol agents are, most of the victims are migrants. They don't vote. They cannot donate money to politicians. Nobody cares about them. If nobody cares that agents are shooting migrants with the excuse of, well, they went to go pick up a rock, even though no agents ever died from having a rock thrown at them, they're not going to care about women or children in custody who are being raped or sexually assaulted. But here's the thing. I hope that they're going to care about female agents, and then perhaps that could lead to other discoveries. But I'm not so sure that they will, because in this country, I mean, they're taking away women's rights now to, reproductive freedom and stuff. So my opinion is this country really does not like women. And so I don't see that anything's going to happen unless, if the female agents all came out and started saying this, if people like Gloria Chavez, who knows this is true, came out and said this, if female watch commanders came out and said this and said, enough. I mean, even if they assign somebody with academic creds, somebody who's an expert in sexual assault, serial sexual assaults, systems that hide sexual assaults, and they allowed them to go in and look at the OPR records, look at the union file records and all the complaints, and look at the EEO records, but redact the names and even without holding specific people accountable, I would want to know that. I want to know how extensive it is. It's fairly extensive, but I really want to know the percentages and stuff, because essentially the government has created a secret system to hide all the sexual assaults that are going on in this agency, and frankly in others. And if we heard that about Ecuador or Mexico, we'd be like, oh, third world countries, oh my gosh, they're just terrible. But you know what? We're doing it here. We're doing it here, and we have been doing it since Border Patrol, at least in my experience, I would imagine since the first female Border Patrol agents were in 1975, I would bet they have some stories too. Number one, I want to say from the get-go, I think Gloria Chavez should have been the first female Border Patrol agent chief. She is incredibly intelligent, incredibly highly skilled as a Border Patrol agent, And when she goes into, she's been in charge of 4 sectors. And although I disagree with the policies of the Border Patrol and the brutality and all that other stuff, in regards to, is she an excellent manager? Is she an excellent Border Patrol agent? Is she intelligent? Can she run an entire agency like that? 100%. I do not hold her responsible for her husband's actions. Her husband, Assistant Chief Gus Zamora out of Yuma sector, was arrested for kidnapping and raping a fellow junior female agent who he had mentored, which is typically what these guys in upper management do. That's how the rape culture looks in upper management, is they put their arms around a junior female agent who they know is being harassed, just like I was and Supervisor Donner in my book, and all that happened. This is what happened to this young woman. He claims he was too drunk to consent himself, and therefore he's as much as victim. When this first came out, it came out October 5th, I believe, 2019. And it came out in the New York Times, and I was quoted in it. And then on October 6th, 2019, Gloria Chavez, who was then the chief of El Paso sector, came out with a fluff piece by Albuquerque Journal that stated how great it is to be a woman in the Border Patrol and how you're just one of the guys and nobody sees you as a woman. You're just an agent and it's fantastic and yay, 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 rah, rah, rah. That I blame her for. The cover-up and the constant need to portray the Border Patrol as something that it's not. And she knows damn well, because she surrounds herself in every sector that she goes to with female agents, because she knows she cannot trust a lot of the male agents. And she gets rid of a lot of the problem male agents. She knows what's going on. So I don't know what her situation is with her husband. I don't know if they're separated. I don't know if they're divorced. I don't know if she believes him. I don't know. But that's the type of crap I'm talking about that female agents at rank pull. You know, it's this attitude of, well, you know, back in my day, it was a lot worse. And I had to go through it and I got through it. So you tough it out too, or else you can't hack it. And that's what agents say to me. Agents who, you know, write me and threaten me and stuff. They're like, oh, you couldn't hack it. I heard you were a slug. I heard you. And that's what they always say, because that's like the worst thing you can say to a Border Patrol agent. And it's the same game that they always play. But nobody should have to hack being raped or sexually assaulted in order to become a Border Patrol agent.